The following is from the Agency for Instructional Technology, AIT.
A good drawing isn't just a faithful reproduction of a person or a scene. A drawing or painting says a lot about how the artist felt while working. Just like music, drawing conveys feelings and indescribable emotions. In this show, Paul will demonstrate ways to help you include moods and feelings in your pictures.
I'm drawing lines. We call these mood lines. These are the lines we have to work with when we want to create particular emotions in a picture. We have vertical, horizontal, slanting, erratic lines, curving lines, converging lines. This is what we use to create a certain emotion. You know, the French artist Gauguin once said, "All good art begins and ends with emotion." And he's probably right about that. We've learned to use color to create emotion. We've learned to use tone. But shape and line also is part of that emotion. And the lines that we draw go with our picture and help set up the stage for the kind of emotion that we want the viewer to have. Now let's look at some of these lines in pictures and see what emotion it suggests to us. The mood in this picture is suggested first by the lines. You notice how most of them are horizontal and some sloping. And then we go to the value or the tone. It's very light, pleasant. And also the colors are pleasant. And the reclining figure even suggests possibly some sadness. The lines forming the shape here suggest an eye direction toward the ground. But it's pleasant and it's not in conflict. And it's repeated in the background of the two haystacks to the left. In the far background is a repetition of the same shapes and forms. Although you have a lot of horizontal lines here, they're erratic. The white caps suggest that there's a strong wind. And then you see the rock cliff. There's a contrast in direction and shape, and also the vertical lines suggest power. So you have mood lines suggesting action, activity, and power, and it's repeated by the upright figures in the lower right-hand part of your picture. Here's horizontal lines. I can use one or repeat some. They suggest rest or peace, not action. That's why the seashore is so restful. Horizontal lines. Now, if you have a storm coming up and a lot of wind, then the water and waves turn into erratic lines, suggesting action. So we've changed the mood by changing the horizontal lines to action lines, and you'd have large waves or white caps here. That suggests a lot of force, energy going on. Also slanting lines. You would use slanting lines if it was snow or wind or a gale. So now as we started out with the mood lines were horizontal, restful, peaceful, we've changed them now, shown another mood line which is erratic, explosive, power, and added a third one. And that's the slanting lines. So there's three of our mood lines. That's not all of them, that's just three of them. But now here, if we're drawing a picture and where our lines are composed of these selections here, we're going to have a lot of action and we're going to have a lot of activity in our picture. We also have mood lines that suggest power or strength, weakness or sadness, or reverence. For example, This line is curved. It could be weakness, and it also can be sadness. By elaborating, meaning adding to, this could become a figure. And it gives us the feeling of sadness because of the curved lines. And we can repeat it for more attention. And you have the feeling of sorrow. Now for strength, we like vertical lines. And many times these vertical lines are repeated in a building with columns. They don't need all those columns to hold up the bank building or whatever the building is, but they put them in there to suggest power, the repetition of vertical lines as a forest or on the columns of a building. Also, converging lines. They suggest reverence, deity, looking toward the sky. So here in this demonstration, you have three mood lines used: vertical lines for strength, converging lines for deity and reverence, and curving lines for sadness. See how line and direction and shape create moods? Well, that's not all we have to work with. We have also color and value or tone. Let's look at this color sketch. First, look at the lines. The lines on the limbs of the tree turn down, which gives us a feeling of sadness. The lines on the top of the man's shoulder and his head tend to droop. And then, if we go into color, the color is in the low values, and it's in the cool colors, the blues and the greens, which tend to set a stage for a sadness, not a happy picture. Now let's take the same subject, and by changing mood lines and the value, the tone, and colors, we'll change the emotional response we'll get from this picture. First, I'll suggest a horizon line here. And if you remember here, the central part of our picture was a man and a child. So I'll make some indication of where they're positioned. Now see, you notice in using the same figures, but changing the lines somewhat. Here the head is erect, it's going to be erect, the shoulders are going to be square. So we have a chance of a picture that shows more happiness and not sorrow in it. And we'll change a mood line here for the child. He's pointing, looking up. And even though these are beginning sketches, you can see already the lines have changed the idea of the picture. And we'll come back and refine that in a moment. Going over here, we had trees over on the left. And you noticed in the other picture, the limbs of the trees turned down, which give you a sad feeling or a weakness of the trees. It wasn't a happy feeling at all. But here we'll turn them this way, up. Now we have an uplifting feeling. So in breaking up the space, we've changed the mood lines, we've changed the value because this is a much lighter value. And now when we go in to put in the tones, we can use some cool colors, and we'll contrast them with bright sunlight instead of moonlight. I want to make sure that the head here is tilted up. And this head is looking up this way. And the shoulders are erect, standing straight. Because I'm concentrating mainly on the lines, the mood lines. And then for a suggestion of color, instead of the blues that we had in the other picture, we had bright, warm colors here. And they would be reflected off the figures. And we would probably have that color reflected in the clouds, in the sky. And the trees, instead of the blue, would be brown. And the limbs would be upright. And the same subjects, the man and the boy, the same design, the same breakup of space, but by tone and by mood lines, we've changed the idea of this picture. Now we have a chance of having a happy picture. And I could bring in some warmer colors down here. So these things are good to know, because when you start out a drawing, you have to locate it in time, and you also want to create a setting. In a theater, it would be called a set or a movie set. But you do the same thing in art. You're creating a set here. And I think that's pretty much enough to show you how it can be changed. Now, that doesn't mean you always want this kind of a picture. Maybe you want a sad picture sometime. That's all right, if that's what you want to interpret. But I wanted to show you that the lines, the shape, the tones, and the colors can have effect in setting the stage for the emotional response that you want in a picture.
Choose a subject for a drawing. Use shape, line, and tone to tell your story and build a strong emotional response.
We want to get feeling and emotion into our artwork, even if it's a rough sketch. And you've seen some of the ways we do it, with the line and the shape and the tone and the color.
To emphasize the feelings of sadness, action, peace, power, or divinity, certain types of lines can be part of your drawing. Value and color add even more emotion to your drawings. Drawing with Paul Ringler is produced by the Agency for Instructional Technology in association with the Oklahoma Educational Television Authority.